Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here because it is officially time. The Toronto Blue Jays are set to face the New York Yankees in the ALDS. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, we are here to tee up this ALDS that has seemingly been hurtling down the tracks for the most of the season, and it's finally here, and it's going to begin on Saturday.
Here it is. It's the series of the season.
Until the ALCS.
Until the ALCS. We've said that a couple times, but it does not get any bigger than this, bringing the New York Yankees to town, the mecca of baseball, against the arch rivals, the ones that had their number all year, your Toronto Blue Jays, with a chance to rubber stamp the American League East title championship. This is going to be some fun fireworks in the week ahead.
Yeah, it's, obviously there's been a little bit of drama between the Blue Jays and the Yankees in the past calendar year, in the past few seasons. There's been certainly a fair share of storylines and headlines made by these two teams. And, it was even made better by the fact that they kind of had this race down the stretch where the Yankees came in and won 8 in a row to kind of push the Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays hold them off and win the division and get the bye. And now they're going to have to hold off the Yankees with home field advantage, having been sitting at home playing these inter-squad games for a couple of days and kind of waiting and watching as the Yankees and Red Sox went to a third game, some really high tense baseball there. Before we kind of get into the specifics of previewing the Jays and Yankees, I mean, Red Sox Yankees lived up to the hype, I would say. Cam Schlittler today, like, man, hell of a postseason debut, like probably the best, close to the best playoff game that you can pitch.
First guy, I believe it was with double digit or maybe even been 12 strikeouts and no walks. Jake Arrieta, 2016. That's some pretty good company for Cam Schlittler. And the
You got to hit
Jays,
both the L's there.
you gotta hit both the L's. And you're hoping he gets handed two L's if he pitches in two games against the Jays. I digress. He potentially lines up for maybe a game three, but this is a guy that, among several others, are going to be a key turning point, a key point of contention, the pitching in particular, because the pitching really was, I think, the story of this Red Sox Yankees series. It was a low scoring, just as most of these games have been low scoring, high intensity, and all about who really out homered the other in most respects. But really, just three basically nail biters until the very end when the Yankees kind of pulled away. Because ironically, it was the Red Sox who bumbled and fumbled defensively, to end their season. So a classic, I think, in some respects. The Red Sox complete the historic collapse, dare I say, the first team to blow a lead in
The
the wild
first
card
team to blow
series.
a 1-0 lead. Never happened before. A team has never lost 2 games before.
It's never happened in the history of Major League Baseball in the postseason in the wild card round. Don't worry about all the qualifiers. So now you get the Yankees and you get the Blue Jays. You get Aaron Judge, you get Vladimir Guerrero Jr., you get Max Fried, you get Kevin Gausman, you get Ben Rice, you get, I was gonna say Bo Bichette, but he will not be playing. So George Springer, you get. I mean, there's just so many stars that are gonna be on display for this series. Dare I say this is like the real ALCS? Is that too egregious of a take? I mean, I know a lot of people are high on the Mariners, but to me, these are the two best teams in the American League, literally by record, but by other metrics as well. And as such, feels like it might be the best baseball we get until we reach the World Series.
Yeah, I don't think it's a hot take to say that it's the two best teams in the American League. I don't think whoever wins gets a free ticket to the World Series. Seattle will be tough, assuming Seattle beats Detroit. You got to beat Scooble likely twice in a 5 game set, so that'll be not easy for them, but this is going to be some pretty exciting baseball. And let's kind of get into the roster machinations because we are sitting here on very early on Friday morning as the Blue Jays haven't announced their roster, so we obviously don't know exactly how things are going to look. And I would assume that that's going to come Saturday morning is kind of when their final decision is going to be made to try and give a Bo Bichette, a Chris Bassett who threw to yesterday, and give those guys kind of as much time as possible to be certain that they're either good or not good to go. You mentioned Bo Bichette. I mean, Ross Atkins maybe playing a little coy when he said on Wednesday, I believe it was, that every day has gotten better for him and that he's doing everything he can to be ready. And him and John Schneider both sounded optimistic about Bo Bichette. I think that everything we've heard kind of leading up to this is that Bo will not be ready for this series. So I think kind of safe to say that he probably won't be available, but certainly would be a surprise if he was, and you would obviously accept it if he is, and if you feel like there's a chance that he can be back, then you're probably putting him on the roster. I mean, I think we can start there as far as this like 26 man conversation. Like, do you need to do to include Bo Bichette on your roster?
Well, it becomes very complicated because if you do include him, he's just a designated hitter, it would seem. And even at that, him being ready for game one seems almost impossible at this point. He still hasn't started running the bases. He's still got this ginormous brace on his leg. This is not a guy that is going to be ready to play baseball in 24 to 48 hours. I'll tell you that much. He's throwing, he is keeping himself ready, but there's only so ready you can really be if you are not doing one of the most important parts of baseball, actually running the bases. So to me, if they do include him, it's going to really complicate matters as far as exactly where a guy like a Santander does he become a full-time left fielder? Are we looking at Springer, the full-time right fielder? Are we looking at Vladdy Jr., the third baseman? I mean, that's unlikely, but is that a possibility? I mean, they're going to have to get creative if they do feel like he's going to be on the roster because they're basically going to be trotting out three designated hitters at that rate. So it'll be very difficult.
Do you think if say that there's a world that his timeline kind of lines up with like him being ready for a game five or a game four, would you include him on the roster or not?
I think you
Again,
have
that
to.
you rule out that he's not games one through three, but maybe game four and five.
It's such a dynamic piece. It's such an important piece that to not include him on that roster, if there's even a sliver of a chance that he is going to be available, to me would be an enormous mistake. Now, with that said, it severely handicaps you as far as flexibility goes. It's going to come at the expense. You've got the list here. It's going to come at the expense of likely an Isaiah Kiner Falefa. It's going to come at the expense of a Ty France. It's going to come at the expense of a Joey Loperfido. And these are guys that are going to be able to play the field and play the field well. The Jays' calling card for all of their offensive outbursts this year remains their defensive acumen. And to lose some of that flexibility, to include the outside chance of a Bo Bichette appearance is a dangerous game to play. Now, this is all hypotheticals because the indications, again, are that he won't be in the picture. We've heard from Keegan Matheson it's unlikely. We've heard from Ben Nicholson Smith that it's unlikely. It doesn't really seem like he'll be playing games this series, but maybe you put him on the bench as a last resort, as a guy that the Yankees have to be thinking about in the back of their mind. Maybe it's more of a mind games thing. The Jays have enough flexibility with guys like Ernie Clement, like a Miles Straw, like a Davis Schneider, that they can plug and play in a lot of places, even if they are kind of a man short. So it's going to be really interesting to see exactly what they choose to do. But there's multiple options here, and I don't think that there's necessarily a correct answer at this point.
Let's take a look at the bigger picture. I mean, 26 men. It's a big episode because I put a table in the rundown. Um, So 26 players will be on this ALDS roster, and on here I have 23 locks. So we have about three spots up for grabs. Are there any of the locks that you disagree with right away?
I think the only lock that immediately stands out to me, I look at Chris Bassett. I wonder about the injury. It sounds like he'll be back, but I wonder exactly where that fits. And then, of course, I look at Tommy Nance over a guy like Yariel Rodriguez, and I recognize that their back half of the season was very different. Nance was an up arrow, and Yariel Rodriguez was a down arrow. But that's definitely going to be something to consider. Now, mind you, Tommy Nance got some really high leverage spots towards the end of the season. So they trust him. But it's going to be really interesting to see if that, is something that carries over to the postseason.
It's actually kind of funny when I'm looking at it now that I put Yariel on the bubble and not Tommy Nance. I probably should have put them both in that scenario. But let's run through the locks that I have on here first. And as we do this, I'm going to move Tommy Nance into the bubble scenario. So that drops our pitching locks down to 10, which is Kevin Gausman, Shane Bieber, Trey Savage, Chris
mind
Bassett,
you,
Jeff
mind you,
Hoffman.
just very, very quickly. You Savage, right? I have him listed as a starter. That might not even be true, by the way.
Yeah, I was kind of trying to do some grouping, and then I slid Bassett down because of the injury, so it felt weird only having the two. But yeah, I think you Savage. What did Ross Atkins say? He envisions him helping prevent runs,
Which
which
is so very Ross Atkins of him to say.
hey, maybe Trey Savage is gonna be lining up in right field.
Maybe he's your shortstop. Maybe he's the Bo Bichette
He's the
replacement.
answer. Um, Yeah, so our 10 pitching locks, Gosman, Bieber, Savage, Bassett, Jeff Hoffman, Sir Anthony Dominguez, Louis Varland, Brendan Little, Eric Lauer, Braden Fisher, and then your bubble is Max Scherzer, Mason Fluharty, Yariel Rodriguez, Tommy Nance, and I put Jose Barrios on here, but it seems quite unlikely that he will be in a position to pitch in the ALDS, and I would imagine that he wouldn't even if he were healthy. So before we kind of get into, I mean, the 26, right? You can do 12 and 14 or you can do 13 and 13. What is your lean for that? Would you want to go 13-13 or would you want to go 14
I
position
I
players, 12
do
pitchers?
I do lean I do lean 13-13, and I think having an expanded bullpen with a Fluharty in there, and we'll maybe get into this in a little bit. I like the idea of having several lefties to go to, because this Yankees team is very lefty heavy in terms of their impact bats. Obviously, it's Judge. Obviously, it's Stanton. But outside of that, you're looking at Grisham, Rice, Bellinger,
Jazz,
Jazz. There's a lot in the way of left-handed damage guys for
McMahon,
this team.
Wells.
The list goes on and on. This is a very lefty heavy team because Yankee Stadium is a lefty haven. So they've smartly built their team around their stadium. To me, I think that you've got to have enough options that at any given moment you can go to a lefty. And I think that Fluharty's basically last month and a half, uh, to me gives a lot of confidence, gives a lot of justification for his inclusion. Obviously, Eric Lauer, you've been nothing but either surprised or downright shocked at the success that he's had. And obviously, Brendan Little has had his moments, he's had his ups, he's had his downs. But another guy that for the Jays right now seems like at the worst, they're number two lefty. So to me, I just think that you've got to probably give yourself as many bullpen options as possible. And in doing so, ideally stack up with the lefties, especially because you're not going to have much in the way of lefties, if at all, you're not going to have to start any games.
Yeah, to me, I think the Bo thing decides the number that you go with. I think if Bo, you're including him on the roster, then I would say maybe 14-12 is kind of the way that lines up, just so you can kind of have, a little more flexibility with him and a little more flexibility with your roster in general. But if he's off, then I think 13-13 is kind of the way to go. And I mean, for our locks on the position player side, we have Alejandro Kirk, Tyler Heineman, Vladdy, Andres Jimenez, Ernie Clement, Addison Barger, George Springer, Dalton Varsho, Miles Straw, Davis Schneider, Anthony Santander, and Nathan Lucas. So that is 12. So our locks, that's 22. So there's four spots left. I think you're right that Fluharty is going to be on because of the lefty heaviness of the Yankees lineup. So I think we can probably safely say that he is going to get in, which brings us to, right back to that 23 number. And then you're looking, I think, let's assume that Bo is out because I think that seems like the most likely scenario. So, if we're building it out, we're going to go 13-13. Who is that last position player that you're going to take? Is it Isaiah Kiner-Falefa? Is it Ty France? Or is it Joey Lopafito?
I think to me, the the choice is kind of between IKF and Low Profito, I think. I think to me, you know, your series is not going to get decided on whether or not Ty France's stick is ultimately a factor in the series, right? It's going to be a question of positional versatility. You know, right now you've got Jimenez and you've got Ernie that can play up the middle, obviously at either spot. You've got Davis Schneider that can play second. You have some options for second and short, less so for third. I mean, I'm not sure there's a scenario where, even with Fried and Rodon, I'm not sure I want to take Barger's bat out of the lineup because to me, even against lefties, it's worth it to have that kind of power threat even further down in the lineup. He gets one mistake pitch and Barger's a guy, Ernie can't really do damage like that. Jimenez can't really do damage like that. In some respects, Kirk can't really do damage like that. There's very few guys that can really get into a baseball the way that Barger can. So to me, it becomes a question of, so do you want the extra lefty off the bench? To me, the Yankees are going to be so lefty heavy as it is, I'm not sure that having the extra lefty necessarily needs to be the priority. And I think at that point, I think Isaiah kind of left becomes the more sensible solution based on the lack of Bo Bichette, based on the defensive versatility, the ability to play some third base, the ability to be a defensive replacement, at second if Davis Schneider's there, and depending on if you've got to kick some guys around, you want to put maybe Schneider in left instead of a guy like Anthony Santander. It just provides a little bit more flexibility than just Joey Loperfido, who, his spot is in some respects almost already filled by Miles Straw, just the weaker hitter of the two, but obviously defensively a much stronger acumen.
I think they tipped their hand on the Loperfido thing down the stretch, right? Like he didn't play all that much, even though he was on the roster. Ty France, obviously on the IL. I think you're right that IKF is kind of the 13th man there, just with, you mentioned the versatility. Even the ability to hit like some velocity, I think is something that he kind of brings that's unique to the lineup. Obviously, the Yankees aren't running out like Crochet and Chapman and those types of guys, but Cam Schlittler, I guess if you need a guy to kind of slot in a pinch at bat, maybe that's the type of guy that you want IKF in there against. But yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Defensive versatility, no Bo, kind of lines up for IKF to be that guy. And
So I guess my kind of follow up would be, is there any concern about being able to generate offense against the Yankees pitching staff that, basically shut down the Red Sox?
I think that the Blue Jays offense is just generally better than the Red Sox, and especially when they're going to be running out kind of like their A lineup. I think too when you kind of think about it, if you're looking at Loperfido or Ty France, right? Like, where are their at bats coming from? Like, Loperfido is probably not getting at bats over Nathan Lucas, Santander, kind of like you mentioned, definitely not over Varsho, not over Springer. So, I think you kind of read it that way and you see that there's no room for him. IKF, kind of the same thing where I think there's probably going to be like, how many IKF at bats do you get in the series? Like, I would set the over under at 1.5, maybe. And, same thing, like, it's just kind of there for if one of your infielders goes down, then you kind of actually do need a guy. So I think he kind of fits in nicely there. And as far as the concern offensively, I just think that they probably whoever this 13th guy is doesn't even factor into that.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment, right? it becomes a question of what kind of insurance are you looking for?
Exactly.
And right now, the safe bet feels like Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. So that's the safe kind of thing for us to. There's not a lot of arguing going on there. Let's argue a little bit about Trey Savage and how he's going to
Well,
get
let's
used.
let's let's figure out the rest of our staff first, right? Because right now we're at 11. We still have two spots left, and it's Max Scherzer, Yariel Rodriguez, and Tommy Nance.
I mean, to me, like, how are you going to include Max Scherzer on this roster?
Bullying is an effective tool.
I'm sorry, I just don't see. I'm not really sure I'm all that interested, even in like a piggyback situation.
So what do you make about the thing of him throwing 70 pitches in 5 innings today? That completely takes him out of the running for games one and two, but
It
kind of
keeps him,
slides his timeline into the game three or four
yeah.
thing. And it almost, it's obviously intentional that they did that, right? And, maybe it's a thing where it's like, hey, you're not going to be on the roster, so we got to like kind of keep you fresh for the ALCS or the World Series or kind of whenever we need you. But, you know, it is at the end of the day, Max Scherzer, and we've talked about this, right? Where it's like you got to make decisions to win. But, if you're kind of weighing Max Scherzer or Tommy Nance, which way are you going to pull?
I mean, I think the answer should be obvious. It's very clear the Blue Jays feel differently about that. It really kind of points to Scherzer being the piggyback guy either for your Savage or your Savage being the piggyback guy for Max Scherzer. I'm honestly not all that interested in seeing Max Scherzer pitch in a playoff game. I'm just not. I think that, especially against the Yankees, a team as capable of hitting the long ball as them, you can't trot out the fading corpse of the homer prone version of Max Scherzer. It is not something that is worth the risk. I mean, you've got obviously a guy like a Chris Bassett, and he's had his struggles on the road. So, do you try to keep him away from the road? I'm not really sure that's a possibility. Do you want to maybe piggyback him with your Savage, and then who goes game four? It's just it's not entirely clear. But I don't see a universe that Scherzer's contributions to an ALDS roster outweigh the potential for a Tommy Nance in a game two or a game three to come in for a shutdown seventh inning and be really effective as he's been for much of the back half of this season.
So you're saying your final two spots on our pitching staff are going to be Yariel Rodriguez and Tommy Nance.
I mean I guess so. I think that Yariel Rodriguez to me represents a much higher upside, even with the walk concerns, than a Scherzer does, because Scherzer is just getting absolutely bleeping tagged these days. I'm not interested in putting Max Scherzer in a situation where he has to face anybody basically capable of putting the ball in the seats, and that accounts for probably 75% of the Yankees lineup.
So let me run out some of the Yariel numbers for you because I would imagine some people would listen to this and say Yariel Rodriguez is a lock, right? I think that's probably a fair take. He was one of the most important relievers throughout the year, and he was, just generally electric at some points. However, the last 2 months of Yariel Rodriguez under the hood, not quite as effective. The fastball velocity in the May and June was 96, 97. In May, he averaged 96.9 miles per hour with his four-seam fastball. In September, that was down to 94.8, right? And as we've seen with Jeff Hoffman, pretty big difference between tickling 97 and trying to get up to 95, right? So and also to go along with that, I mean, the strikeout minus walk rate in August was minus 2.2%. In September, it was 6.4%. And even if you want to go back to July, it was 7.4%. So he
Uh,
is, kind of been on this downslide over the course of the year. And I think that you can kind of see that in his usage as well, right? Like in May he threw 17 innings, in June it was 11, in July it was 12, August it was 9, and in September it was 10. So I mean there's a reason why I put him on this list, and I think that there's a possibility that he does get left off, but I think kind of when we're coming down to this conversation, even if you want to look at like his batting average against in August and September, it was over 200 when through the first 4 months of the year it was below 200. And
How
in August
much
it was 273.
how much of that is slotting guys ahead of him like a Sir Anthony Dominguez, like a Louis Varland, like the Lauer breakout, like the Braden Fisher breakout, like the Fluharty breakout? How much of that is guys jumping him as opposed to him sputtering to a
Did
to a great degree, but sputtering in the back half?
Were they jumping him because of how effective they were or because of how he
I
looked?
think I think it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. Maybe
Yeah.
not so much the case with necessarily Lauer, but Fisher and Fluharty and Sir Anthony Dominguez and Louis Varland all came in and locked it down in September.
So here's what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna say on my 13-man pitching roster, I'm probably gun to my head, I probably go Yariel and Nance over Scherzer. But in the scenario where, you look at it, you're not sure what you Savage is kind of going to line up as, I think I would go Scherzer and Nance. And to me, that's because when you look at the Yankees lineup, who are you confident putting Yariel in there against, right? We've mentioned how
Yeah.
lefty heavy they are.
Well,
And
who,
their
who are you
right-handed hitters
who are you
are
confident putting Scherzer in against? I guess is my follow up.
That's fair, but I mean, I think maybe a little bit of length at least there. Like, I don't know, whoever you feel more confident in kind of getting back to the form that they showed a couple months ago is basically the answer. And obviously, for us sitting here, we don't have any of the inter squad data. We don't have any of kind of the bullpens, the internal conversations or anything like that. And again, this is kind of like the same thing with IKF, where how many innings are these guys actually going to throw in this series that are important innings. I mean, in a way, every single playoff inning is important, no matter
Yeah.
what's going on. But um, to me, I think Nance is the guy that you put on out of this group for sure. And then the Scherzer Yariel thing is kind of where it comes down.
Yeah, and I just don't know how Scherzer is part of that equation. I think it's such a dangerous dance to toss him out in any situation. Um, how much do you think the Jays are really wishing that they had maybe one or two extra starters from the deadline here?
Isn't it funny how things have changed when they're like, they're at the 6 man and it's Barrios and Scherzer and Scherzer when he was shoving and we're sitting there like Gosman, Bieber, Scherzer are going to be the three and then Scherzer does his last, the 25 runs in 25 innings to end the year thing and to me, I just think that there's going to be some semblance of it's Max Scherzer put into the decision, you know, of him at least being on the roster and maybe not getting a start, maybe not pitching really, but at least kind of getting put into the roster because he's Max Scherzer.
He's Max Scherzer. I don't know. It's just to me, that's no different than tossing Bo Bichette on the roster and basically giving up a spot at
Well,
that
that's
point.
that's where, I said at the beginning, if Bo's back, it's probably 14 and 12, and this is where that comes in, right? Like it's, if we're discussing Bo, Yariel, or Scherzer, and then it's like, well, Bo might play in game four, then you put him on the roster. But
And then the pitching all becomes its own kind of mess.
yeah. All
So
right.
okay,
So
so
we've committed to 13 and 13. Let's make a call. We put Nance on. It's Yariel and it's Scherzer. Who is the guy?
we're gonna split the vote here.
I
It's to
know.
me, it's Yariel. I don't trust Scherzer. I don't think he's a guy that can be part of this postseason roster with the way he basically ended the season. I know Yariel also ended the season extremely poorly, but I think it's a lot easier to pick and choose your Yariel spots than it is to pick and choose your Max Scherzer spots.
All right. Well, I think we'll probably just have to agree to disagree there. Again, whoever that 13th guy is probably isn't pitching all that much in this series. So either way, it wouldn't even surprise me if they went with the track record on Scherzer and Yariel and just took them both over Nance.
Ew, which would be a really interesting choice. This episode of the Bird's Eye View podcast is brought to you by BioSteel. Use code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order at biosteel.ca. Again, that's code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order. For all your high performance hydration needs, visit biosteel.ca. Thank you again to BioSteel for sponsoring today's episode.
All right, let's move on to how the rotation actually stacks up beyond, who's on the roster. Obviously, we've kind of talked about game one, game two, game three, whatever, however you want to line it up. And I think the non-negotiable is it's Bieber or Gosman game one, and that's going to be against Luis Heel or Will Warren. Will Warren was on the Yankees wildcard roster. Luis Heel wasn't, but obviously neither of them pitched in the series, so you're going to pick one of them. Um, Bieber or Gosman for you. The kid, taking into the whole thing. I think when you kind of line it up, what's going to happen is the game game one or the game two starter can come back for game five for the Jays, and the Yankees, it'll be Fried who lines up for game two, and he'll come back for game five.
I think to me, the spotty history of a guy like a Kevin Gausman against the Yankees, despite his strong finish of the season, basically sans the last two starts. I lean Bieber. You went out and you got Bieber for game one, exactly for this. And I know that Gausman had those three incredible starts, one of which against the Yankees. But I think I'm more concerned with winning game one and locking that one down. And game two, you want to put up a good fight against Max Fried. That's going to be a really tough one, right? I think that game two, game three, game four will all be tough, tough ones. Max Fried, really good. Carlos Rodon, really good. Cam Schlittler, really good. The Jays got to Schlittler, and I think that, lets you feel a little bit more comfortable. So ideally you take both at home and you've got two chances to take down the Yankees on the road. But I think to me, you're going Bieber game one because you feel like it's your best chance to win. And you're going Gausman game two because of the spotty history against the Yankees and not conceding the game, but a little bit more comfortable with what it might take to win game one and lock that one down as opposed to necessarily game two.
Yeah, I think when you kind of line it up, I think, you're right. Like they acquired Bieber to kind of be that guy. You're not even necessarily committing to that being your game five starter, right? Like in a way, you could probably bring them back shorter for game four if needed, and then go, Gosman, Bieber, whoever you want for game three, and then Gosman, Bieber again for four and five with kind of the way that the off day stacks up there. It would be on short rest on the 3 days. I don't know Gosman on short rest, maybe not exactly the way you want to go. So I think it kind of does make sense to me that Bieber game one, and then I wonder, we've talked about this before, but if you win game one, I've come off this take a little bit. I was pretty like gung ho about it, but maybe not so much as anymore. And then you go Trey Savage game two because you want him to start at home, rather than on the road in Yankee Stadium. But at the end of the day, the atmosphere at Rogers Center is going to be equal, if not even more intense than the one at Yankee Stadium. So it's going to be a intense situation for you Savage to pitch in either way. And so, I mean, what do you think of the if you win game one, go you Savage game two. If you lose game one, go Bieber game two.
I actually, as much as you say you've come off it, I think to me, the way that he expressed willingness and excitement and enthusiasm for pitching at the Dome, there was that quote about, I got the whole country behind me. How can I not be fired up? That to me seems like a guy much more in his element with the crowd behind him. That's not to say there isn't, this bulldog mentality. I want to go out and I want to rip their hearts out. And that's not to say that he wouldn't be capable of starting at Yankee Stadium. But, if things go off the rails at Yankee Stadium, then forget it. That's a guy that it's tough for him, I would imagine, as a rookie, as a guy three starts into his big league career. It's tough to ask him to bounce back from that. I think at the very least much tougher than asking him to bounce back from his first big league playoff start happening at home. And I think there's a lot of reading between the lines going on here. But I actually do, I don't mind the idea of him going in a game two. And I think also that opens up the possibility of a Gosman game three, which is in some respects almost like a more compelling option than a Savage on the road, I think, for the Jays.
Game like it's tough to like assign importance to playoff games, but no matter what, game three is going to be an absolutely massive game in this series, right? Either you're up 2-0 trying to finish the series, either you're down 2-0 trying to avoid elimination, or you're tied 1-1 and the winner takes a massive advantage over the final couple games of the series. So I definitely would understand them kind of wanting to line up one of those guys. I fear that like kind of maybe falls into like getting too cute, right? And then, say you lose game two or whatever, and then that just kind of changes the course of the series, right? Because then you don't hold serve at home and you give whatever. But I do kind of understand, the importance of a game three. This is also us kind of assuming that Savage is going to start when, they didn't exactly express expressively kind of commit to that, right? So I think that there is a chance that we see him out of the bullpen, but the way that it kind of sets up, it's like Gosman, Bieber. I don't know where Bassett kind of slots into this. I think he'll start like a game three or a game four. I don't think you're gonna start him in game one or two. Maybe, you kind of put him into that Savage role, but it's just there's just so many machinations at play when it kind of comes to setting up your first four guys here.
I think that the Bassett thing's such a wild card. Again, the road numbers kind of speak for themselves, but he's a much more, I guess the floor on him is higher than the floor on a Savage blow up start almost, right?
Well, we haven't even like really seen a Savage blow up start because nobody's like
Exactly.
hit. Well, the Royals like hit him kind of hard, but not like out of the park.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Yankees are going to be like the toughest team that he's ever faced in his life. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's just so intriguing to me what they do with him because it seems like the spot is going to be for him to start, like the way that we've set it up here. But at the same time, I think with him, like you can probably get him out pretty quick if you feel like it's going off the rails. And this is where like an Eric Lauer enters the conversation of being so important in this series as well. But man, it's gonna be so intriguing.
Do do you feel like there's anything to be taken away or any projection or any vibes, anything? Cam Schlittler goes out and has an incredible postseason debut, enters Yankees lore. Savage is every bit as capable, every bit as effective as Cam Schlittler is by most accounts. I wonder if Schlittler's start tonight makes the Jays think just a little bit harder about how they want to use Trey Savage.
I mean, him and Early both looked really good, right? And that's a pair of rookies that like did well on the postseason stage at Yankee Stadium. Um, I'm obviously I think you kind of look at it and you're like, that's what I want for my guy to do. But when you kind of, I'm sure that they're probably not going to like make their decision based on that.
Yeah, and I wouldn't expect them to, but I just wonder the biggest reason not for starting him or for being very, wrapping him in bubble wrap is that he's a rookie. We just saw two rookies dice up the other team until the defense failed one of them. To me, there's opportunities for a real showstopper, a real, Blue Jays lore, a real, huge momentum moment, as much as momentum is real in a postseason when momentum is as real as your next day starter. You know, I just think there's a chance, not a zero chance, that he comes out and shoves because guys have not seen him. There's so little on him, and he's an extremely talented and capable pitcher as we speak.
Yeah, no, I honestly, if I had to, put a bet on his start, I would say that he does well. I don't, don't think that he would would kind of crumble under the spotlight or anything like that. And, I just kind of looking it up quick here. Yankees really struggled against splitters this year. I think among the playoff teams, their run value was the second worst among teams that made the playoffs against splitters. So certainly, seems to be like he should set up fairly well against them, especially, as a guy who kind of has like these reverse splits and does well against lefties, right? That he would be in that spot to line up well with this Yankees lineup. But I also wonder if that makes them want to use him in like specific pockets. I
I
like
think that would be you want to talk about getting cute. I think that arguably your third best pitcher being a guy that you choose to use in pockets is about as cute as it's going to get. You think of, and this is, a one guy sample size, but you think of the way that he had Brandon Lau eaten out of his palm. And, I wonder if there's anybody else with a comparable swing path, with a comparable exit velo profile, with a comparable batted ball profile, all of that kind of stuff to say, who's to say that Savage doesn't have a lefty on the Yankees that he's gonna make his son, basically, the way he's completely diced up Brandon Lau through two career starts.
yeah, I think it makes sense to give him a start and then, have Eric Lauer on high alert behind him, basically.
So why then you think the reluctance to say that he's part of the rotation?
From them,
Yeah, for the
I
Jays, for
I
Ross
I
Atkins.
I would imagine that if he does end up starting, that it's just them playing games, that they don't want to give away too much to the Yankees or whoever was coming out of that series.
The
That's what
Yankees.
that's what I would say.
Let's be serious here. It was always the
Wow.
Yankees.
I mean, the Red Sox, I mean, they had the game one, they just needed one win. So, all right. So the way that we have it lined up is Bieber versus Luis Hill or Will Warren game one. Game two, let's say a Savage against Freed, which is
It's a
imagine that.
mismatch.
Wow. Not a mismatch. I mean, it's definitely kind of an interesting one to look at. And then game three, Gosman versus Rodon or Schlittler. I would imagine it's Rodon. And then game four, the Yankees probably have, something up their sleeve as well for that. Actually, well, no, I think it's probably pretty set for them what they're going to do. And then game four, I guess Bassett against Schlittler or Rodon. And then game five, Bieber against Fried.
Yeah, if it gets there, right? I mean, that game four if the Jays are down 2-1, that there's a lot of you know what I mean?
Um, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they'll be in like those first two games are pretty important. So that's why,
Yeah,
the
to say the
more
least.
the more that I said here, like maybe you just go Bieber Gosman and then give your best shot at winning those games, especially like you get Max Fried at home and Fried, really good pitcher. And I think that he kind of fell, under fell to the wayside this year with Scooble and Crochet doing what they did. Like he had a really excellent season. But
He'll
he's
probably end
hittable,
up,
right?
yeah, but he'll end up,
Top
if
three.
not a Cy Young finalist, top five for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
So, this is not an easy matchup. But I do, I also think of the way that the Jays handled him back in July, and I'm not sure. Again, he was swooning as were the rest of the New York Yankees. But I wonder if that's something for the Jays, because he'd come in dicing everybody up leading up to that start, and then the Jays get to him, and then because the Jays get to him, it snowballed a little bit for about a month there. And I wonder if the Jays maybe have something on him potentially. I don't know if that's going to necessarily be the case. I think that it's a pretty large statement to even hypothesize. But the way they got to him when nobody else was, tells me that there's a confidence and a comfort level facing a Cy Young candidate.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I guess kind of before we move on from the rotation thing, Bassett thoughts, like I think, you kind of set him up for this by putting him on the IL and setting it up for the DS. Like it's a guy, same thing, right? Like I think, I've said this a bunch this year that I've been really impressed by like when he struggles early, like his ability to kind of bounce back and like give you a quality start. But, it's the postseason. Can't really have any of that. If there's struggles early, you kind of gotta hit the panic button and trust your bullpen, I guess.
Was his 5 inning and then pulled for precautionary start? That was was that against the Twins, the Red Sox? I'm trying to remember who that was against. Because that was, I think, right before he hit the injured list. He may have pitched one more game after that.
It was against the Orioles.
What is the
And then he
Orioles?
pitched one more.
And then he pitched one more. I mean, I think I look at that start and maybe you can draw conclusions. I mean, the Jays did not have an easy time with the Baltimore Orioles by any stretch, and that was an Orioles team that came on at the end of the year. I think that the Bassett thing is going to be really, really fascinating, just as far as exactly who he is when he does ultimately take the mound this postseason, because it seems pretty likely we'll see him at some point.
So of the guys that we're kind of putting in the mix here for starting or pitching or whatever against the Yankees, the regular season stuff like probably doesn't really matter because it's new, right? Slate clean, whatever. But of these guys, here is the leaders among the Blue Jays pitchers in K minus BB against the Yankees. Number one, Max Scherzer. He went 32.2 K percentage, 8.5 walk percentage, so 23.7 K minus BB. Chris Bassett is second. He went 17.6 K minus BB. And then Kevin Gausman was last among that group with a 6.2 K minus BB. However,
Again,
the home run issues, Scherzer and Bassett both over 2 per 9, and then Gausman was under 1 per 9 against them.
I mean, that's kind of, I mean, it's all spelled out right there, right? I mean, Gosman has not dominated the Yankees the way that he's dominated other teams historically, and Scherzer and Bassett have had home run problems. Lo and behold, against one of the top home run hitting teams in Major League Baseball. I just, I don't envy John Schneider. I think this is going to be a really delicate dance. There is a right answer. I think there's a right answer, and he'll have
Yeah.
to find it.
Yeah.
But this, they have the staff to compete with the Yankees. They have the hitting to beat the Yankees. Now you got to figure out exactly what combination gets you over the finish line to the ALCS.
So Bieber, they hit him from them this year. There was the one where he was lined up and then they kind of bumped him from that weekend. Interesting. So I think that that's something to maybe keep in mind that he did hide from them, or they did hide him from them, and the Yankees haven't seen him, and they haven't seen you Savage. So interesting stuff there. Let's move on, though. Obviously, more more things to discuss than just the who's going to pitch, because end of the day, guy could come out after 2 innings. We saw it with the Red Sox and Brian Bayo, and it happens all the time in October. So let's move on to I think kind of more of the nitty gritty and just kind of the ebbs and flows of a series. I have it listed here. Most interesting individual matchups that you're going to be watching for. Let's start with yours. You're talking some of the Jays bullpen against the Yankees lefties.
It's again, it's a little bit cheating here. Um, Lauer, Flew, and Little, assuming all three are in the picture here, are going to be extremely important against the rest of the Yankees lefties. The Yankees, one of the most heavy lefty lineups in terms of just the pure potential damage they can possibly present, in Major League Baseball. It's a team that They faced Garrett Crochet and literally had to completely alter their plans, and we saw where that got them. I think for the Jays to be successful, they're going to really have to neutralize those lefty bats. I look at a Jazz Chisholm. I look at a Ben Rice and the way that he announced his presence in game two. Um, I mean, Cody Bellinger has historically this season raked against lefties despite hitting left-handed, obviously. He's going to be a guy that's going to be a dude you're going to have to dance around. The lefty pitching for the Jays, especially because there are no left-handed starters, is going to be enormous, to say the very least.
Yeah. I kind of went the same direction as you cheated, even though I wrote individual matchups. I put Jay's pen against Judge. I think the righties that they pick to face Judge is going to be really interesting to me. Again, head-to-head matchups like kind of aren't super predictive of what's going to happen in the future. But when I search Judge against the Blue Jays pitchers, guy has a 2,000 OPS against Hoffman and
So
Varland.
what?
He has a well against Hoffman, he's 2 for 4 with a homer and a walk. Against Varland, he's 2 for 5 with 2 homers. Um, Sir Anthony Dominguez, he's 2 for 3 against. Like the righties against Judge is going to be a really interesting kind of game that they play. And actually, yeah, right. Like Jory's holding up 4 fingers right now, and I think that we're not going to see Aaron Judge maybe hit all that much, especially as with your point with the lefties, right? Like I think there's this world where you bring in those lefties with the intention of just not pitching to Judge with them at all, right? Like Fluharty, Lauer, Little, and in that pocket where, the Yankees are going to go Grisham, Judge, Bellinger, Rice, and you're kind of like, hey, you're going in there, Brendan Little, to get Grisham, Bellinger, and Rice. Like, just don't throw a strike to Judge, or we're just going to put him on. So,
Four.
um,
Four. Just the
however,
whole series. This guy should have two at bats this whole series. The very first at bat in the first inning, and precisely zero others actually at that note.
I think at some point you're gonna have Judge at the plate in a situation where you're probably gonna have to pitch to him, right? So I think the Varland, Dominguez, Hoffman group there, the Hoffman one is gonna be so interesting to me, and it's kind of skipping ahead. I listed him as the X factor of the series
Well,
because
let's get into the X factor because we've kind
yes,
of we've kind of
yeah,
locked
yeah,
in
yeah.
on the
You don't want to
matchup
hear
so
my
much.
Anthony Santander versus Max Fried.
Well, let's just say I think that Anthony Santander, if he's playing a major role in this series, something pretty unfathomable has happened.
Well, I mean, I think he's going to be in there at some points and with the ability to change it. But yeah, I Hoffman, I listed him as my X factor for the series because they have, they're steadfast in their commitment to him as the closer. There's, all the trust there, and if he can get like the adrenaline bump and the bump of not having pitched in a while to get some velocity in this series, that's going to be huge. And I think that they're going to put him in the biggest spots, which maybe not like the biggest spots, but probably in like the ninth inning spots. I don't think you're going to see him used the way that Mason Miller was used, or even the way that the Red Sox used Aroldis Chapman. I think that Hoffman is going to be like very clearly like a ninth inning guy in the series, and they're going to put that trust in him. And to me, like as the guy who's going to be protecting leads, it's going to be a really, really important spot for him in the series.
Yeah, I think that that's probably the most obvious pick. Maybe a bit of maybe under the radar is not the right word, but I really feel like Eric Lauer is going to be such a huge
Yeah.
X factor because he's either going to be an important lefty against, again, the cavalcade of lefties, or there's a chance that he piggybacks off of if anyone has a blow up in the first two, 3 innings and they need a little bit of length in the 3, 4-ish inning range. Um, to me, I mean, it's almost unfathomable to say this, but on pure situational importance, might end up being the most important guy to the Jays this series as kind of the bridge guy, as kind of the glue guy. He's not going to be your best pitcher this series. He's not going to be your most important pitcher necessarily this series, but in terms of just the situational stuff, I don't know who else is going to be put into more critical, more, call in the ambulance, call in the emergency squad, call in the ER, call in the first responders, and he's going to be the guy performing CPR a lot of the time.
They're Andrew Miller for
He's
the
going to have to
series.
be there, Andrew Miller, a little bit.
Give me an offensive X factor because we've talked, so much pitching.
Yeah, I think it's got to be Vlad. I really don't see it's so obvious, but this is a guy that's had mixed results as a postseason hitter, but has just obliterated the Yankees. And if he's the Yankee killer version, Jays are going to be a really tough team to beat. If he's the playoff body version, this could be a very quick October run for the Blue Jays.
Can't put it any better way myself. We also have listed here. I mean, X factors for the Yankees. I put Schlittler, but I would kind of probably move off of that. I think the lefties. Like you mentioned, like I think Bellinger and Wells and Jazz are like really gonna kind of decide this series because the Jays probably aren't going to pitch to Judge all that frequently, right? So anybody on the Yankees that you're kind of specifically looking at is like that's the guy that I don't want or that you kind of think if they play well could swing the series.
Yeah, it is gonna be a bit of a lefty showdown, right? Which is bizarre to say when the Jays are not exactly lefty heavy. There is one lefty the Jays do have, and you've got him as an X factor though.
Yeah, as a hitter, I mean, I put him as like my pick to click for the series. I think there's a big Dalton Varsho home run coming at some point in the series. I think specifically late against the Yankees bullpen when you kind of look at the Yankees bullpen and who they are. Devin Williams kind of has got the changeup going down and away. You got Fernando Cruz and the devastating splitter. Varsho, notably a guy who handles changeups and splitters down really well. So I think that he has a big swing this series in him against those guys.
Yeah, I like that pick too. I see what you're saying about the guys that are gonna have stuff going down in that direction. Um, could be an enormous X factor for this Jays team because again, that secondary offense, that secondary slug, he is potentially even primary slug at this rate, given the rate that he has basically homered this year in a condensed schedule.
Give me somebody like I put pick to click. Who do you think? Who are you putting your planting your flag on for the Blue Jays as a guy that's going to do well in this series?
Oh man, you know what? Maybe this is just me putting out some cope in there. I really, really hope the adrenaline and the excitement, Jeff Hoffman
Oh, okay,
finds his
okay.
groove. And if he finds his groove, it's going to shorten games. It's going to be really
Yeah.
important. And if he comes back and he's taken this week to get healthy and the adrenaline has got him going, this guy is unhittable when he's touching 97. If he has the velo, he's going to be a huge problem for the Yankees. If he doesn't have the velo, big difference.
The next thing that I kind of had on here was like the thing that you're most confident in about the Blue Jays going into this series. Can kind of be anything. Obviously, we've talked about, a lot of pitching, a lot of, kind of some of the matchup stuff, a lot of the left-handed nature that this series is going to take on. But I mean, what is the one thing that you feel most confident that the Blue Jays are going to beat the Yankees in?
You've kind of put this. I'm gonna try to word it differently enough that we're not overlapping. Um, the Jays the whole year have been all about 1 through 13. The Yankees are not built like that. The Yankees are built for bombs, 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 preferably of the Judge and Stantonian kind. If the Jays can get contributions down the lineup, even when their stars aren't necessarily going off, that to me is the best way they can win. It's not generally how the postseason works, right? We just saw the Guardians try to guards ball their way out of the wild card round, and they hit how many extra base hits, right? Like it took them until game two to rack up their first extra base hit. It's a dangerous game trying to play small ball in the postseason. But if anyone's built to do something like that, It's the Jays who have so many guys you can plug and play in so many different spots that the opportunity to have an unlikely hero show up, to me, that's something I think I've got a lot of confidence in the Blue Jays ultimately being able to present, making life difficult for the New York Yankees.
Yeah, I'm glad you put it the way that you did because I mean my thing was that I feel pretty confident in is that like the Blue Jays aren't going to be out of a game in this series, right? The way that they've come back all season has been super impressive. Like you mentioned, the depth of the lineup, putting up tough at bats, everything like that. I think they're going to be kind of dialed up to 100 as far as when it comes to working at bats and working pitches out of the game, which is going to bode well against this Yankees team, right? Whose bullpen has been shaky to be kind to the way that they've delivered. And for the Blue Jays to have been this resilient group who, battles out starters, I think that they are going to be in a prime position to take advantage of that Yankees bullpen. And, especially with, we'll get to this in a second, but the Yankees ability to hit home runs and the Blue Jays starting pitching tendency to allow home runs, that comeback nature might be required in this series to kind of, make up some ground later in games when hopefully, the Jays bullpen is in there and doing its thing and, stepping up a little bit like we've seen more recently than we did in the middle of the summer.
So should we get into that?
Yeah,
We've
so I
talked
put
about
the
our confidence here.
The biggest concern for the Blue Jays in the series to me is that exactly. We talked about it earlier. The Blue Jays starters tendency to allow home runs. You can, even group like their entire pitching staff into that with Jeff Hoffman. Just, they've given up a lot of home runs this year, and the New York Yankees hit a lot of home runs. And we know how well the home run ball plays in October and how out homering your opponent is basically a formula to winning in the playoffs. So that it doesn't line up great that that's kind of the one team's weakness and the one team's strength. But, on the other side of that, I think that the Blue Jays obviously found a formula that worked for them winning this year, even when their starting pitching was giving up a lot of home runs. So I think if they can limit kind of that early damage, then they'll be in a good spot.
I think I'm gonna kind of narrow it in a little bit on that, kind of zone in a little bit. It's number 99.
Well,
I think it's Aaron Judge. And maybe it's a cop out for that to be the answer, but Aaron Judge is either the MVP or the MVP runner-up this year. He's my MVP runner-up mostly because I'm a hater, but this is a guy having another historic season. Uh, the only guy not named Barry Bonds with multiple 200 OPS plus seasons this side of the 21st century. This guy is a menace, a freak, a monster, a, a villain, a criminal. They're sending their worst. They're not sending their best. Aaron Judge is going to be a huge problem for the Blue Jays. And fingers and toes crossed, they find a way to work around the potential damage he could cause. The Red Sox, ironically, did that. They held him to four singles, and they still weren't able to get it done. So the Yankees aren't just Aaron Judge. But imagine how that series goes if Aaron Judge had started crushing baseballs.
yeah, it's one Aaron Judge swing off of Garrett Crochet, one Garrett Judge swing off of really any of those pitchers, like completely changes the game, right? So I think, yeah, you're totally right. Got to find a way to limit him and then, see what you can do against the rest of them. And if you're just walking Judge, then so be it. But this guy is a guy who has played pretty well against the Blue Jays, and you're really gonna try and limit him here. Um, Outside of like the on-field stuff, I mean, this is kind of on-field, but the great thing about like playoff baseball is that there's other characters involved. There's the stadiums, there's the managers, there's other kind of things that impact the game that maybe don't quite come up in the regular season as much. And I think, watching the Yankees Red Sox, it was really the managers that took like this really Cora versus Boone thing that happened.
Who can hit the wrong button first?
Yes. And, John Schneider's in that spot now. And I think that he is going to become a very intriguing character in this series because he's gonna, you mentioned it earlier, he's gonna have to, you know, at the controls of this thing, he's got to kind of keep it balanced and hit the right buttons at the right time. How confident are you in John Schneider's ability to do that in this, his third postseason at the
Man,
helm?
man, if I wish I knew. I'm kind of the opinion that managers add maybe 2 to 3 wins a season. But with that said,
How many
this
games do
is
they lose per season?
I mean, well, I think you don't think it's kind of like I don't know, man. It's hard to say with certainty if John Schneider is a good manager. Every manager is a bad manager except for Craig Counsell. That's my understanding of it. Um, I think to me, if you think John Schneider is going to be a character in this series, he's going to end up a character in this series. If you think that Aaron Boone is going to be a character in this series, you can bet your ass he will be a character in this series.
Maybe that's just me projecting because I watch the managers too much.
I just don't really know what to expect other than, you know, there's I'm not sure if you're familiar with the bias for action or the
Yeah.
action bias.
Yeah.
Um, there's this propensity for people to be like, I need to do something because it is doing something when not doing something is the preferable option. I don't know if that'll be a factor. I mean, it's postseason baseball. Managers love pulling levers. Um, I think of John Schneider and how he took the bat out of George Springer's hand earlier or hand, excuse me, earlier this year when he tried to steal second base with I think it was Miles Straw at the dish. Is he going to do something that egregious in the postseason? I don't think he would. All of this is to say I'm just going to throw my hands up in the air and give it to you because I don't even know what to expect from this.
I don't really have an individual take. I think that we are going to learn a lot about John Schneider in this next week or so here. I think that, obviously the Twins thing still lingers and the Barrios and Kikuchi thing is still there. I think the way that this organization has shown this year is that, it's pretty firmly moved on from that, and that's, it's still a thing that I think fans think about and talk about frequently, but I don't anticipate seeing something like that. I think that there is going to be an urgency behind John Schneider in this series, and but I also think that he's shown a very firm trust in his players this year. So I think while he's going to work with that urgency, I don't think that he's going to maybe pull those levers too early if a guy has kind of shown that he's doing a good job.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that makes sense.
Um, last kind of fun thing I put on here. Obviously, one of the most cool things about October baseball is that teams, bring back players, bring back guys to throw out first pitches that are kind of franchise legends and everything like that. And the Blue Jays getting to host a playoff game for obviously the first time since 2022, are going to have the ability to do that. Do you have kind of anybody that you're hoping to see? I think Jose Bautista is like, if you were to put odds on it, he'd be like the minus 10,000 favorite to be the guy doing it. But anybody you'd like to see and anybody you think might be running out there.
Joey Bats might. We know that Edwin Encarnacion will be in the building. That might be an easy one. I
That'd be
wonder
so funny. He
if
just throws a first
I
pitch and
know,
then
right?
goes
I
into
know,
the
and then goes right into
dugout.
the dugout. I wonder if we see Joe Carter. That might be one
Yeah.
you save for the World Series, but if do you bet on him coming in later or do you bring him in now? Could it be international superstar Justin Bieber? I mean, I don't know exactly who
To
it'll be.
Shane.
To Shane.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have a specific answer. But Jose Bautista, like you said, feels like such an obvious one. He was in town recently. Um, he's got a connection to Toronto still. Feel like feel like we're likely to see him at some point.
Yeah, 100%. I'm sure he'll be in and around eventually. I wonder Kevin Kiermaier, first pitch, run it back. Um, one guy, I mean, hey, Tom Hankey was on Jays Talk Plus the other day. Um, maybe they run out a guy like that from the World Series teams, which would be pretty cool. Okay. I mean, we did the picks for the wild card series. The picks are officially back. How are you feeling? Let's go through the bracket first, and we'll end with Jays Yankees. But let's start on the NL side. Your pick and how many games for Phillies, Dodgers, and Cubs, Brewers.
I was talking about this at work the other day, and I know Zach Wheeler's not in the picture, but I still really like the Phillies. I think the Phillies can bang with the best of them. Obviously, Trey Turner's had a huge bounce back year. Kyle Schwarber's going to get MVP votes, and you got Sanchez is a Cy Young candidate. I mean, he led. It's baseball reference war is baseball reference war, but led all National League players in baseball reference war, right? And that's maybe a bit of a volume thing, but still, exceptional year for him. And then, of course, you've got Jesus Luzardo. You've got, um, man, I'm forgetting there's number two guy, and he's literally
Ranger Suarez.
like, there you go. Like, he's going to be a factor too. It's, you know, this is a team that's capable. That's really good. That to me is a pretty good bet to win the World Series, win the whole thing. And, the Dodgers obviously were the Dodgers. But I just think that I still believe that the Phillies can knock them off this series.
In how many games?
I'm taking the Phillies, but I don't see any way it doesn't go five.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Phillies in. I'm just trying to think of like how the Dodgers rotation is gonna stack up because they're gonna go Shohei, Glasnow, Yamamoto, Snell, and then I guess back to Shohei again for a game five, and then the Phillies will be Sanchez, Suarez, Luzardo, Nola, Sanchez again. Man, what a
That's a
series. It's
that's
gonna be
a
fun.
that's
It's gonna be
fun.
fun. I'll go Phillies in five as well. I think the Dodgers bullpen, like just whatever just happened to them in this series against the Reds, where like Roki Sasaki, I mean, don't get me wrong, Roki looked incredible, but if he's gonna be your savior at this time of the year, I think you're gonna have some issues. So I'm gonna go Phillies in five, and the Dodgers bullpen plays a major role in that.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good bet.
Brewers Cubs.
Yeah. Um, it's chalk at this point, but the Brewers are so superior to the Cubs, in my opinion. I'm sorry, Matt Boyd is not good enough to be the number one guy, your ace, on a legit World Series contender. I know that the offense is there. I know that Tucker's picking it up. I know that PCA had a big game three. I know that Seiya Suzuki's having a huge year. I think I talked about all of this basically in our wild card preview. And to me, just it just doesn't compare to the Brewers. The Brewers are such a machine, and I know that they're a little bit Jaysian, but they are like the Jays if the Jays weren't run differential merchants. And so
It's just we're sitting here going through this. We've gone through this all year, and you're gonna say that when we've done this podcast all year, and they've been so good, and we're still gonna have run differential conversations.
I like the Brewers in three.
I don't even know what to say. I'm gonna go Brewers in four. Um, Jameson Taillon looked great today. I'll say that. But Freddie Peralta and co are gonna be
Too
Brewers are
much
gonna
there.
finally slay the dragon a little and move on. And Craig Counsell's gonna have be sad to watch his
Yes,
former team move on.
exactly.
Let's move on to the AL side. Tarek Skubal against the Seattle Mariners.
Yeah, I think you put it pretty succinctly there. Um, the Tigers are interesting, man. That team stunk in the second half. Blowing a 15 and a half game lead is, I keep using this term, and because I think it's so beautiful, Just an absolute dog's breakfast of a second half from them. Tarek Skubal is just a menace. All those words I used to describe Aaron Judge apply to Tarek Skubal. And I'm not sure Wenzel Perez as your number three hitter is indicative of a team capable of taking down uh, the hottest team in baseball since basically the trade deadline. Again, I think the Mariners waltz through this one, and I don't really see it being close. I think it's Mariners in four.
I will also go Mariners in four. I mean, Scooble probably wins game two, maybe, but I wasn't impressed by the Tigers really in the series. I think the Guardians, we talked about it earlier. Not the best baseball team over there, and just the offense wasn't there. And I think the Mariners are set up really well, especially you kind of got the Ichiro vibes going around there, and what a rotation for them to pick from, right? Like they could go Woo, Gilbert, Kirby, Miller, and Castillo in a 5 game series, and be happy with that. But obviously, you're not going to do that because Woo and Gilbert are so good. But and the bullpen too, really really great. So Mariners in four, giving some respect to Skubal, but Mariners are very much a good,
Agreed.
better team. And to the finale, Blue Jays, Yankees. What is your feeling for this, and how do you kind of think that we're gonna ride through this?
Yeah. Uh, give me Jays in five, but oh, geez, I'm not sure I believe that even myself. But we are a Blue Jays podcast. We are a Canada baseball podcast. And as such, it's Blue Jays in five.
Yeah, I will say I was kind of toying around with Jays in four because I think that I like the Jays in game one against Heel or Warren. Game two, we already mentioned, going to be tough against Freed. I like the Jays against Rodon. Rodon obviously had a great year, but I think if the Jays line up their pitching really well, that they could be kind of riding into Yankee Stadium and jumping Rodon in that game. And then in game four, Schlittler looked great tonight, but I also think that the Jays showed that they can hang with Schlittler, right? So I'll go Jays in four. I think the Yankees bullpen maybe costs them a winnable game, and in a series that should have gone five, the Jays take it in four, and they're riding on to host the Mariners.
I wish I had your confidence, man. I wish I had your confidence.
It's gonna be fun, man. It's gonna be fun. The postseason is a different beast, and for this group, this is kind of it. This is the culmination of everything they've been working towards. There's going to be a ton of changes in the offseason, and they're the number one seed in the American League for a reason. So I think they have reason to feel confident. They have reason to feel like they are the favorites in the series, even though everybody is probably going to be picking against them because of the Yankees and the way that they line up in postseason baseball. But if this Jays team has done one thing this year, it is prove the doubters wrong. So I'll give you final word. Yankees, Jays, what are you most excited for? And how are your nerves going to be tomorrow?
If you recall, before game 162, John Schneider used the term day to day with tummy troubles. And I think that there's a chance that one maybe spreads around this household as well.
All right. Well, we are going to go. That is our preview for the ALDS, ending it with some tummy troubles. Hopefully, those are solved by the end of game one, and the Jays are rolling through. We're going to be recording after every game, and we'll have an episode up, a short reaction, and be right there, right along the way. So keep sticking with us here as we go. It's going to be a fun ride through the postseason, and thanks so much for listening. If you're listening along on the podcast provider of your choice, make sure to drop a follow and review. If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit the subscribe and like buttons and leave a comment, and we'll try to interact there. If you want to shoot us an email for anything that we can talk about during our post-game reactions, our email is birdseyeviewpod@gmail.com. You can follow us all on Twitter. I am at Worden_Zach. Jori is at Jori Negin-Shecter, and the pod is at BED_pod. Thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the series.